Hey everybody, this is Maxine Taylor, America's first licensed astrologer, with my Trumpology report for August 2020. And I'm going to keep it short and to the point because as we get closer to November 3rd, things are going to be tightening up. They're going to become obviously much more intense. And I'm just going to talk about what is going on. Have you noticed that it's very difficult? Perhaps you haven't noticed, but many astrologers can tell you it's difficult to pinpoint how an aspect is going to manifest in the chart of a country because there are so many millions of people in that country. I'm going to give you the bottom line interpretation on what I'm looking at, and then we will all wait to see how this shakes out. So I'm going to start with Trump's chart. Now, I'm going to start with the sun, obviously. Whoops, very bright there. Let me see if I can, there we go. The sun, the center of our life, whatever house it's in, that is the area of life that comes alive, is lit up. Now, the sun is in Trump's 12th house. That's the house of behind the scenes activities, hidden enemies, prisons, and basically what nobody ever knows about. It's hidden. However, it is a very intense house for Trump because he has Pluto in that 12th house, as we know. And Pluto is the planet of control and or revenge. If anybody, if he can't control you, he's going to vindicate himself. And I say that only because that is what his track record tells us he's going to do. So here it is, the sun lighting up Pluto. Now, in a person's chart, and in another person's chart rather, who is not president and responsible for the lives of millions of people, this can be changed from control to transformation. However, in the 12th house, it's a pretty tricky place for it. And so there's a great deal of control going on behind the scenes that we are not going to be privy to. And so he will be dealing with matters of control as regards his family and real estate. And I say that because Pluto is the planet we're looking at here, and Pluto rules his 4th house of home, family, and real estate. And that's on the 1st and the 2nd. So he's getting into the whole control picture in the next couple of days. Then the sun sits on Mars. Mars is war, Mars is passion, Mars is anger. And when the sun sits on Mars, you get angry, you get energized. And then, as if that were not enough, because he's going to be fighting mad. On the 22nd, it crosses into his 1st house. It sits on his ascendant. And when the sun is on your ascendant, you come alive. You feel great about you. You do what you want, when you want, how you want, because you want. And we're looking at Trump's chart, and I know that there are so many of you now saying, but he always does what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, because he wants. Yes, and he feels empowered. The sun, the giver of life, our ego, empowers him. And you might say, well, the polls aren't looking good, and this and that. We have to read his chart from his standpoint, from his view. Does that make sense to you? Not my view, not your view, the way he's reacting. And so he's really filled with power for the rest of August and part of September, of course. Now, let me just flip over here and talk about the new moon and the full moon. As we know, on the full moon, things come to a head. The full moon is the third. I'm going to make it easier to read here. My handwriting is atrocious. That's not much better. Well, take my word for it. I wrote over the green. On the third, we're having a full moon, and that is when things come to a head. This is his sixth house of work, health, service, and subordinates. And this is where the energy comes to a head. His daily activities. It is in opposition to Pluto, which means he's losing control on some level behind the scenes that we will not know about. I'm telling you about it because I'm looking at it right here and I'm sharing it with you. Now, 2 weeks later, after the dark of the moon, we have a new moon. And the new moon is when the energy starts growing one more time. Okay. The new moon sits on his Mars. The sun sits on his Mars. And so this new moon on the 18th, the sun sits on Mars on the 19th. The new moon on the 18th triggers anger. Great deal of anger. Let's get going now. Let's not wait around. Let's get to it. And there'll be a lot of irritation on his part. It also sits on the ascendant. Sun crosses the ascendant on the 22nd. So there is a great deal of me going on. And again, several months ago, on a few of my Trumpology videos, I said, we ain't seen nothing yet. We ain't seen nothing yet. The closer we get to the election, the more we ain't seen nothing yet. Okay. Now, let me keep on going here. Again, this little table here is just covered with paper. All right. Venus, the planet of love and money and beauty, is in his 10th house. It's been there. And he has loved being in the limelight. You might say, well, he always loves being in the limelight. Yes, and his public image, when you have Venus up there, improves. And you might say, how could it improve? The polls don't indicate that. Well, with his followers, he's feeling great. On the 7th, it moves into the 11th house of friends and group activities. I'm assuming that would be Congress, that would be the Senate, that would be people who are his friends. And Venus sheds a loving light on them. On the 16th, it sits on Mercury, and so he can have some lovely conversations with friends over hopes and wishes. The 11th house is hopes and wishes. Venus sits on his anti-vertex, and Venus is one of the good guys. It's the lesser benefic. Again, look at this from his standpoint. And then it sits on Saturn on the 23rd. And Saturn is crystallization. It's structure. And so Venus is being real sweet here to his 11th house people, his friends, and he's going to be relying on them for favors and for loyalty. Saturn, loyalty. Okay. Then let's look at Mercury, because it's following the path of the sun. Mercury, the planet of communication, the blue one, is sitting on Saturn and Venus. So there's a lot. Mercury is not an action planet. It's a thinking planet or a communication planet. And so lots of talking to old friends, Saturn, uh, people who might be his supporters, because they would fall in that 11th house too. And Mercury on Venus is quite charming. Mercury on Saturn is quite serious. This would be him reminding people of perhaps favors that they owe him, that type of thing. I say that because we're dealing with politics, and there's a real, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours when it comes to politics. Quid pro quo. So Mercury then moves into that hidden 12th house on the 5th. And that's where the conversations really get going. On the 10th, sits on Pluto. And so there's a good bit of control involved. Now remember, the 12th house deals with hidden enemies. It deals with jails and prisons and confinement. Most importantly, it is behind the scenes activities, things we'll never find out about. So I'm thinking, excuse me, cat fur. I have a cat who lets me live with her, and I'm always dealing with cat fur. Okay, I'm thinking of the play Hamilton, where they talk about the room where it happened. This is the room where it happened, and nobody knows what happened in the room where it happened. And there's more anger going on as Mercury sits on Mars. The sun sits on Mars on the 19th. Mercury sits on Mars the 17th and the 18th. The sun sits on Pluto on the 1st and 2nd. Mercury sits on Pluto on the 10th. And there will be, with Pluto, there's coercion, there's control, there's manipulation, there's all or nothing. All or nothing. And then with Mercury on Mars, fighting, anger. On the 19th, Mercury moves into his first house. And he will be sharing more ideas. You might say, well, he does these press conferences now. He's going to be talking even more. Remember, he has to stay in office, because if he is voted out, the Southern District of New York is going to hit him with all kinds of indictments. And he is trying to protect himself from having that happen. Finally, Mars, the planet of war, the planet of impatience, what we'll fight with and fight for. It has been in his 8th house of other people's money. It has been in his 8th house of secrets and sex and symbolic or literal death and rebirth. But secrets it is. It deals with taxes. On the 8th and 9th, it moves into the 9th house. The 9th house deals with the big picture, long distance communication and travel. And this, to me, says that he's dealing with people from other countries, that it's based on anger and impatience. And so these are foreign ambassadors, perhaps, presidents, but people from other countries. And he's throwing his energy into that. It can be trade as well. But whatever is going to keep him in office, this is what we're talking about. Okay, this is Trump. And remember, we've got a few months to go till the election. And I know that recently he's talked about not having the election, postponing it until after the pandemic has passed, etc., all kind of things going on. Now let's talk about the United States. All right. And I'm going to remind you of what the houses mean in a mundane chart, in the chart of a country versus the chart of a citizen of that country. So let me start here. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay, let's start with the sun, all right? The sun lights up whatever house it's in. It is the giver of life, and it has been in our third house, which is communication, news, reporters, public opinion, travel, neighborhoods, schools, teachers, public transportation. It rules everything dealing with correspondence, transportation, communication. On the 6th, it moves into the 4th house of the United States chart. And the reason I'm going by my notes is I don't want to leave anything out. The 4th house rules real estate, and people are without money, without jobs, and real estate can be at risk. But the sun is the giver of life. So there is something that can be like something that saves the day. All right, the 4th house is real estate. It deals with a party out of power. That would be the Democrats, of course. All domestic affairs, the weather, land, farmers, crops, our food supply. This is very, very helpful. I know that there are some farmers who are donating crops, which they would have to toss to people who don't have the money to buy food. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do. I love that. And this also deals with seniors. So, home and family, seniors, crops, the land, the very foundation of our life. Now, the full moon, when things come to a head, sits on our south node. In a personal chart, I read it quite differently. The south node in a mundane chart can mean losses, and this deals with long distance communication with foreign countries, foreign dignitaries. The full moon sits on the south node and on the midheaven. The midheaven represents the Republican Party and the person in power, which is Trump. The 9th house deals with the upper courts. And so there can be some issue that the south node indicates that which we have already mastered. And so if we spend too much time there, we get drained. It can be a loss. This deals with things that have been handled before in the upper courts and foreign travel, higher education, religion, advertising, science. Now, science is going to find a vaccine, right? Okay. Insurance. Of course, this deals with the Supreme Court. So there can be an issue there of loss on some level. World trade and universities, because students in college are told that they will have to attend college virtually. So we'll have to see how this works out. Now, the new moon on the 18th goes back to home, family, real estate, crops, mines, seniors, the weather, all domestic affairs. And it gets a resurgence of energy. So this is very exciting to me. Now, Mm. Let's talk about Mercury. Now, Mercury is what we think about and talk about. It's in our third house of communication. It naturally rules communication. And so we're talking about the news media, reporters, public opinion, traffic, domestic travel. Third house is nearby travel. Schools, teachers. And what's so interesting to me is that on the 8th, the North Node, which is the area of greatest success, is triggered by Mercury. So I feel very good about that. And I'm hoping that our wonderful teachers get a break. Now, on the 11th and 12th, Mercury enters the fourth house of the United States chart. Again, real estate, domestic issues, crops, the weather. Again, there's talk going on. No action, just ideas. And that's all right. It's in the planning stage. On the 26th, Mercury enters the fifth house and sits on Neptune. Now, Neptune deals with liquids, with gases, with viruses, although Pluto is more the virus. Escapes of all types. And it's in our fifth house of fun and games. And so I know every sports fan is hoping that their dream will come true, which is that the teams will play. I certainly hope so. The fifth house also rules children, sports, of course, theaters, the birth rate, congressional and public hearings. So there are going to be more of those, more than likely. There can be confusion. Neptune is confusion. Stadiums, make believe in the stadiums, the pictures of people in the stands, and teachers again. All right. The final card I want to show you is, to me, truly the most interesting. Now, let's start with Mars. In Trump's chart, Mars was in the 8th and the 9th, but he did have a lot of activity going on behind the scenes. All right. In the United States chart, Mars is in the 11th house. This deals with Congress. It deals with congressmen and legislation and the Treasury, city councils, and the friends of the United States. I would say that with Mars in the 11th house, there's going to be a good bit of arguing in Congress. And I hope they can get it together and find some solution to whatever deal is being presented at the time. Now, on the 13th, 14th, and 15th, Mars moves a little slower than the Sun and Mercury and Venus. It moves into the United States 12th house. And in a mundane chart, this does deal with bribery, spies, hidden enemies, prisons, hospitals. Hospitals are absolutely under the microscope now because of the pandemic. Criminals, charitable institutions, secret society. Interesting, it deals with slaves and slavery and welfare. So there's a great deal just of embroilment, of fighting behind the scenes. Now, these are our hidden enemies too. And so these can be hackers, these can be people from foreign countries who are waging war behind the scenes, and we will not know it. I'm telling you it's going on because there it is. Now, let's look at Venus, because this is the part that is positive. Venus is the lesser benefic. It deals with beauty and love. It is in the first house of the United States chart. And we all know what's been going on. However, it shows that the political attitude and public health can experience an improvement. And after watching all of the riots that have been going on, this will be welcome. Unfortunately, Venus moves out of the first house on the 8th, but it enters the second house of our income, our money. And wherever Venus is, it brings joy, it brings happiness, it can bring blessings. On the 10th, we have a Venus return in the second house of money. And this can give the average person more money. I don't know how, but I'm thrilled to see it. The second house deals, as I said, with money, with our earnings, with the stock exchange, with banks, and with commerce and trade. Venus on the 13th sits on Jupiter, which is the great benefic. It deals with abundance. And so there can be some financial relief at that point. And then on the 20th, Venus sits on the sun, the giver of life. And so this gives me a great deal of hope and optimism about our money situation and the income of the people. Now, on the 29th, Venus moves into the third house. Again, the news media, reporters, everything that I've talked about before, communication, correspondence, transportation. And this brings a different attitude, a different outlook, a more loving, happier outlook on the 31st and September 1st. I had to put September 1 in there because it's still going on. How is this going to work out? I do not know the details because that remains to be seen. You know how the news cycle happens so quickly. It turns on a dime. It's hard to keep up with the players. However, that Venus is encouraging to me. So, that's August for the United States and for Trump. As we get closer to November 3rd, and keep in mind that Mercury goes direct on November 3rd, and that is an instability in the energy, a flux in the system. Mercury will move into the shadow of the retrograde, the after retrograde shadow, and will not come out of that until the 19th. And that's, of course, when mail-in ballots hopefully will be completed, and hopefully will not make that big a difference. Hopefully we will have a clear-cut decision right around Election Day. So come back. I'm going to keep with you, keep you up to date as we approach the end of the year. So, till we meet again, this is Maxine Taylor saying, may the stars shine brightly on you and yours. And God bless America. God bless our planet. God bless every country, every citizen on our planet.